Hello everyone, this is Dalster and welcome to another episode review for Dark Side the Ring, and in this episode it focuses on the life and career of Nunchak. It has been a couple of years since I watched this episode, and sadly a couple months after it aired, Nunchak had passed away. Nunchak was a very extreme wrestler who really shocked me and a lot of people, I bet. He almost killed an audience member and said some really harsh things about Chris Benoit after the murder-suicide, which is understandable since a lot of people have different opinions on Benoit. It is sad how Nunchak lived and died kind of young, but I will go and rewatch this episode and explain my thoughts at the end. Trigger warning, as Nunchak used to be in ECW, and during that time ECW was very violent in the early days, so if you're sensitive to blood and violence, this episode might not be for you. I'll start from his childhood before his wrestling career. Nunchak was born Jerome Young on January 3rd, 1962, Greensboro, North Carolina. During his childhood, Jerome's dad was an alcoholic and hated Jerome's mom. There was an incident where his father stabbed his mom 5 times in front of Jerome and the rest of the family. She survived the stabbing, and a few months later, Jerome's mom tried to leave his father until the father shot Jerome's mom in the leg as she was holding a young Jerome. His mom somehow survived. Again, Jerome's father died when he was 5. Jerome said in the episode that he does not have a good relationship with his mom and that she was not a fan of him wrestling. Jerome said while being interviewed that he is flipped out in the head because of his childhood, and it's the reason why he's made some painful decisions in his wrestling career. As he got older, he started to wrestle and got the name Nunchak from the movie title Nunchak City. The movie title was an interesting name to go by as Nunchak started his wrestling career. Nunchak got into wrestling by Ray Candy. Ray wanted Nunchak to create a new character that no one has ever seen before, as Nunchak was entering the wrestling independent scene. Jim Cornette, who was the owner and booker of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, hired Nunchak because he was able to get the crowd angry and that he also had this heel energy. The audience in Smoky Mountain Wrestling was full of white people. One time, Nunchak cuts a promo in which he was praising O.J. Simpson, who was known to murder his wife and a man. The audience was not happy about it and were mad with Nunchak. During his tenure in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the LA riots were going on and OJ was facing trial. Nunchak tried to embody a persona from those events and cut some promos that angered the audience. Eventually, Nunchak was paired with another wrestler named Mustafa Saeed, and they were known as the Gangstas. They were going to be called the Gangsters, but Nunchak thought it would be better if he and Mustafa were known as the Gangstas. Someone said in the episode that Mustafa had a look that looked like he could kill someone. The Gangstas said things that black people wish they would say to the white people. D'Lo Brown was a security guard for the Gangstas and was also a punching bag for the audience. There was one time where Mustafa smoked pencil shavings and got high out of his mind as he was arrested by the police one day. Mustafa thought that the police were going to screw him, while Nunchak thought that Mustafa had lost his mind. One day, Nunchak goes to the store and buys a baby doll and shows it to the audience with the noose hanging around its neck, which is rope, by the way. The audience was very upset by it as the doll was white, and back in the day, black people used to get hung by those during the slavery era. In another segment, the Gangstas tried to recreate the 1992 Rodney King beating, but the other way around, as they had Nunchak and his crew of 3 to 4 men beat up Ricky Morton from the Rock and Roll Express. Nunchak and the crew had knife sticks and used them to beat up Ricky. Once again, the white audience were not happy about this and waited with bricks in the back for Nunchak and his crew to hit and beat up with. The police were able to escort Nunchak and his group, as no one got hit by bricks. The NAACP and the city of Knoxville thought it was a bad representation for the black community. Nunchak thought that Smoky Mountain Wrestling was not fun since he was called the N-word a lot during his time there, especially when he wrestled shows in the South. One kid went up to Nunchak and rubbed Nunchak's arm. Nunchak had asked the kid why he had touched his arm, and the kid said that his father had told him that he would turn black if he touched a black person, thus making Nunchak angry about it. Eventually, the Gangstas got an offer from ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, said that Nunchak and Mustafa left on bad terms with him in 1994. but Jim knew that they belonged in ECW, especially since ECW was very violent. ECW was in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was brutal and bloody in the 90s. When New Jack first met Sandman, New Jack told Sandman to not F with him. Paul Heyman was in charge of ECW and wrote a majority of the storylines. There were tables, ladders, chairs, barbed wire, and trash cans everywhere in a lot of the matches. Then on November 23rd, 1996, ECW would be on the news because of this incident that had happened that day. A guy who said that he was 21 was actually 17, as he had a match with New Jack on November 23rd. The 17-year-old was named Eric Kulas, and he had done 3 matches and was known in wrestling as Mass Transit. Eric donned a bus driver gimmick and was asked by Paul if Eric could compete in a match for ECW. He, a wrestler named Tiny, and Tiny's brother went to ECW and competed in the match. ECW security guards Stu and John were there that night when Eric competed. Axel Rotten was supposed to be in the show but was not able to due to a family emergency. They replaced Axel's spot with Devon Dudley and had him work with Eric. Before the match had begun, Eric came up to New Jack and told New Jack to cut him up, which New Jack said in the episode that he felt disrespected as he was not the kind of person who likes to be ordered around. New Jack also said in the episode that he was high on that day of November 23rd. He told Paul that he was going to do something to Eric and that people would be talking about it in 10 years. Paul wanted Eric to get beat up by New Jack, but this would escalate in a dangerous way. As Eric gets beat up brutally, Devon was safe as New Jack paid more attention to Eric than the match. To make matters worse, Eric's father was in the audience and saw the whole thing. New Jack sliced Eric so bad that so much blood poured in the ring mat. In a clip from the match, you can hear Eric's dad yelling out that his son Eric was 17 and had asked where the referee was in a scared, shaky voice. Mustafa then body slammed Eric as New Jack talks on the mic and said that he had hoped that Eric dies of bleeding. Eric's father calls New Jack the N-word as Eric sticks his middle fingers in the air as he was being treated for his open wounds. Eric got 50 stitches from his head and never wanted to wrestle again. This would be known as the Mass Transit Incident. New Jack was charged with assault and battery. As he was in court, New Jack asked Tiny the Terrible, who worked with Eric, if he would defend New Jack, and in return, New Jack promised to take care of Tiny and get him in the WWE. Tiny the Terrible is a midget wrestler who was in the Jerry Springer show and would get the ladies. The judge made Paul Heyman say the N-word as Paul was explaining what Eric's dad had called New Jack to the judge. New Jack managed to work out something with the court as Eric's family tried to sue New Jack in a civil suit for damages caused by the incident. But in 2002, Eric died from complications from a gastric bypass surgery. When asked what New Jack thought about Eric's death, he said that he did not give an F, and was like, oh well. Tiny ended up working with WWE as he did some promo work. It's no surprise that New Jack was a dangerous wrestler and a daredevil who would jump off higher and higher balconies in each show. He said in the episode that he thinks that he was the only one who snorted coke in the locker room as well. In 2000, a wrestler named Vic Grimes faced New Jack in a match as Vic was a chubby guy who wanted to be hit with things, which was part of his gimmick. As New Jack and Grimes were up high from some balcony-looking thing, New Jack throws himself and Vic to the ground but hits New Jack's neck. New Jack broke his leg and cracked a part of his skull. He said that he had lost his sight in his right eye and would have insomnia because of the cracked skull. A year after the match, New Jack has another match with Vic and is out to get his revenge. Vic apologized to New Jack, but New Jack said in the episode that Vic never checked on him before their second rematch and was upset by this. As the match started, New Jack was already high and tased Vic in the high balcony looking thing. New Jack throws Vic from the top and manages to survive as Vic was a foot away from outside of the ring. He landed on tables and New Jack told Vic, who was laid on the floor, that they were even. Grimes only got injured in his ankle, but New Jack said in the episode that he wanted to throw Vic to the ground. When asked which match was the most violent, New Jack said that it was a match he had with Gypsy Joe. In 2003, New Jack faced Gypsy Joe when Joe was 72 years old at the time. Gypsy Joe had a gimmick where he was a man impervious or unaffected to pain. He was not selling New Jack's moves as the audience started calling New Jack the N-word. New Jack started to get really upset with the crowd as they kept saying the N-word and telling him to go home, and he ended up hitting the crap out of Gypsy Joe. New Jack gets a bat and hits Gypsy Joe more and more as he begins to bleed on the top of his head. Afterward, New Jack became a liability to wrestling owners. WWE never hired New Jack as they were afraid that WWE would end up with lawsuits or bad press. In 2004, New Jack lived with a wrestler and promoter, now recording artist, MWW in Florida. MWW said that New Jack was like a comedian and a great cook while he was living in MWW's house. Back then, MWW owned Thunder Wrestling Federation. A wrestler named William Jason Lane, whose wrestling name is Hunter Red, wanted to face New Jack. They eventually did, and Hunter Red asked New Jack on what they should do. As they go in the back and New Jack was trying to explain what they were going to do, Red leaves in the middle of the conversation, causing New Jack to be upset about this. New Jack got high and snorted coke before the match had started. Once the match started, Hunter Red punched New Jack in the nose. In his pocket, New Jack had a knife and used it to cut Hunter Red. When Hunter Red sees the knife, he tries to run away, but New Jack was able to slice Red. He sliced Hunter Red 9 times, but New Jack said that the news reported that it was 16 times. The cops came in and then arrested New Jack. New Jack was charged with battery for a possible 15 years in jail. Luckily for New Jack, he got the charges dropped and left Florida. When asked who Jerome Young is, New Jack did not have the answer as he was more into his character than he was Jerome. Tiny says that New Jack should have never gotten away with hurting his opponents. Jim Cornette said in the beginning of the episode that he had heard that New Jack was a bounty hunter who did homicides. At the end of the episode, Darkside the Ring says that they tried to get Eric's family to be interviewed for the episode, but they refused as they did not want to be re-traumatized. New Jack said at the end that if they made a movie about him, he would probably be in a wheelchair, snorting coke and sticking his fingers in the air as he would say "thank you B-word" while laughing about it. Unfortunately, New Jack passed away on May 14, 2021. He died of a heart attack in his home state of Greensboro, North Carolina. Interviewers for this episode are New Jack, Jerome Young, Sandman, Jim Cornette, D'Lo Brown, Tiny the Terrible, Stuart Stu Kaplan, ECW Security, John Donovan, ECW Security, and MWW, former wrestler and now recording artist. I give this episode a 7 out of 10 as it was okay, but New Jack really expressed himself in an aggressive way. In a way, I can't help but feel bad for him because of his childhood. It must have really screwed his mind as he was 5 when his dad died. However, I do agree with Tiny that New Jack got away with a lot and should have been accountable to many of his actions, especially when he beat up Gypsy Joe, who was a senior. New Jack also had a lot of control, which is a huge problem for wrestlers because of their egos that they develop later in their careers. Examples would be Goldberg, Hulk Hogan in WCW, and CM Punk in AEW. It was kind of hard to like New Jack as he did come off as an aggressive guy but contributed a lot for his character. I wish that things would have been better for him when he was still here because I think New Jack would have been more happy if he had connections with his coworkers in a friendly kind of way. New Jack is a good example of what happens when parents abuse and are uninvolved with their kids. I think had he been raised in a better environment, we probably would have never gotten New Jack. Some interesting facts about New Jack that were not mentioned in this episode is that New Jack's mom cheated on his dad with another man, which is why she got stabbed. Although it's still not a good reason to stab her in front of young Jerome and his siblings. As a kid, he moved a lot when he was in Georgia, as he and his mom stayed in houses until they would eventually get evicted. He graduated high school and was able to attend Clark Atlanta University because of his success in football. At the age of 15, New Jack started robbing places and went to prison for 2 years. After getting out of prison, New Jack was a truck driver and a bounty hunter, which Jim Cornette was right about. Other than ECW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, New Jack was in the United States Wrestling Association, TNA, Total Nonstop Action, North Georgia Wrestling Alliance, XPW, and other independent promotions. His entrance song, Natural Born Killers, was sung by Ice Cube and Dr. Dre. New Jack appeared as a biker in a show called Early Edition. He was referenced in a Weezer song from 1996 called El Scorcho. Smoke DZA, who is a Harlem rapper, also referenced New Jack in the album Rugby Thompson. Funny fact, New Jack was in an episode for The Daily Show called Stay Out of School. New Jack accused Vince McMahon of murder and faking wrestlers' drug tests. He also accused Paul Heyman of stealing some money from his checks. I don't know if it's true or not, but New Jack tested positive for HIV. In 2009 to 2011, New Jack was in a relationship with Terry Runnels, but filed a lawsuit so that New Jack would not release explicit photos of herself. New Jack had 5 kids, but one of them said that they were disowned because they were a drag queen. He denied that he had disowned his son, but his son later stated that New Jack tried to fix things with his son and was proud of him before his death. In 2016, he collapsed while walking home from an event. But that's pretty much all I have for today in this episode review. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Comment, like, subscribe if you want, and until next time. Bye guys.